to dive directly into the point of this conversation, maybe to introduce the first question, I would like to ask you, Deborah, if you remember, I will call you memories. Do you remember when and how does it feel for you when you discover for the first time or the first times the work of Niki de Saint-Phalle?
Okay, well, I was introduced to her work when I was an MFA candidate at Syracuse University. I was a research fellow there, and my work had already started to change when I was at the Art Institute at San Francisco. And I knew I was going to work on the body once I got to Syracuse, but what did that look like? How was that going to come about? So I just started gathering different artists, female artists, looking at how they dived into the human body, what it looked like, what was their approach. I mean, one of the things I found when talking about it as a Black woman, that in order to gain agency, sometimes you have to destroy yourself in order to gain power. And I think with her work and her activism in race and gender and feminism, it just spoke to me. The colors, as you can look at my work and see some of the same colors and things, and her mark making. And some of my earlier works, you can see Black lines around images and stuff. So I think that there were a lot of artists like Hannah Hawk and Romare Bearden and different people whose work inspired this new body of work.
Thank you. And Bloum, what about Niki? How the fact that she is American-French artist, and she lived the first year of her life in the US, New York, she was raised in New York, and the last part of her life in the US again. How does it influence her in life, thinking and practice?
Well, I think everywhere where you grow up influences you. It's part of how you're shaped because you're in a system that is the society you grow up in. So she was growing up in New York when apartheid was the way. So that definitely had an impact on her. She was living in a situation of privilege, but it didn't mean she wasn't aware of what was going on. And then later on in her life, for health reasons, she moved to California. Most people thought she wouldn't last there, but she, as she said, she called California madness. And she loved it, and it gave her 10 more years of her life, but she was pretty horrified by certain things that are still going on today. That she used herself in her art as well, like guns and things of that nature. But the racism, the historic, just like how things had changed and hadn't changed, both were happening.
So most of us, almost everyone in France knows the Niki de Saint-Phalle work, so we don't need to unveil the work. But do you consider that there is, Deborah, that there is some ties or relationship in between Niki's and your work? I mean, in terms of formal shape, because we often say about Niki that, about the Nana, that's very, very efficient in terms of colorful and simplicity in her work. And I've heard already that about your work, a part of your work also, Deborah, although the way you combine various sorts of images and painting makes it very complex too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that you can use. Can everybody hear me? Because I'm from Texas. So I can talk loud. So, I think that the idea of use of color and theme in the work also brings people forward in the work. So the fact that like the work, the print that's out forward, the first thing I see is the Black body. I see those thighs. I was like, okay, that looks like a Black woman. Then there's the big blue text, says Black. So that draws you in. And so one of the things that I do in my practice is that I use very bright, vibrant colors, and there's a sensuality in bringing people forward with colors like that. Sometimes, in order to get your point across, you have to use flowers. You have to do some soft way of bringing in the person and then giving them the medicine that they need to cure them. One of the things that I think both of us did in our practice is that we talk about the female body. The female, if you don't look a certain way, fit into this Western idea of what is considered beauty, then where do you lie? Do you always in the back of the room, or you never look to be the person to look to? This is the idea of beauty. It's not the Venus. And so I think that's what she did in her work. And also, when she talked about race and gender, she was a woman out here creating works in a male-driven, society and art. I mean, she, like I said before, Robert Rauschenberg and all these other work, Jasper Johns, who were doing colors and things like that, they moved way ahead of her. And she was using some of the same assemblage works that they were using. Mm-hmm. But that, right away, those names because they were pushed forward. And she kept talking about issues of feminism and things like that. So I think, and my work too, I mean, yes, it's complex, but it takes a lot of effort to make it look complex or simple. And that, I think, is what draws people into both our works. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would be happy to ask a question to Deborah. I remember seeing one of her work in an exhibition which was called The Dirty South. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a great exhibition, I think. And I would be interested to hear you about the question of the South, because we know you're coming from Texas, and in my mind, in my French mind, I must say, I didn't think the Texas belonged to the South. I was thinking of something much more connected to, I don't know, Louisiana, Mississippi, and how is it to be at the same time in Texas, and what kind of African community or African American community in Texas, and what does it mean, the dirty South?
Dirty. I mean, stop videotaping me. The South right now is pretty, not very good in the sense that all the the banning of books and women's rights to their bodies is being under assault. So being from Texas right now is not always a good thing. I mean, Texas belongs to Mexico, but we are a part of the South, unfortunately. I mean, there's a lot of great things about being in Texas, of course, but the politics of Texas right now is really tough on all people, especially Black and brown people. And so what we have to do is we have to keep moving forward and celebrating who we are and the way we do work and the way we explain about work. Texas at times does not feed my work. The world feeds my work in the sense that there's always someone out there struggling. There's always someone who is simply murdered just because of the skin they're in, or their bodies, or they're abducted, and things like that. Or, the story of Child Q in London. Child Q was a young girl who was examined in her outside the classroom by 2 police officers and the principal and another person, and she was told to strip naked. And I keep saying this, if that was in America, Black women would have been in that street, for weeks. You don't assault, and that was assault. They changed who she was. This was a little girl, 14 years old. They changed the direction of her life. Now she is no longer who she was supposed to be. Maybe she can be something different. But that type of humiliation, I don't think that would happen with her peers. I don't think that if she was a little white girl with blonde hair and blue eyes, they would have stripped her naked. I just don't believe that. And maybe that is because of my Texas upbringing, but I think people see the Black body as exotic, as sexualized, and unimportant. And that's what I try to say in my work is that it is important, and it is a human body, not just a black body, but a human body. So I think that's very important, and I think Niki does that in her work too. I mean, in the gestures of you see the women and how free they are, and then you are allowed to be free with your body without being under assault. So.
And the other thing I was wondering, for example, you're talking about real life from an individual, and maybe sometimes it did inspire you some works. But am I wrong, or all the figures we can see from the children, they are not? It's not portraits of someone specific of our life. It's you're working with the type, or you're working with the experience as something which is not particular. It's particular, but it's not someone specific or a specific situation. You're talking about something which is much more. Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes I do works on, like, not very rare, but George Stinney, things that happen to young black children. Right now I'm doing a work with Ralph Yall. There's a little boy who came and knocked at a door in America, and the guy just shot him. Yes. Yeah, so he didn't see a child, he saw a black figure. So I'm working through my pain of that realization that he did not see a child there, and what that means for him and anybody else's child that walks up to a door and instantly shot. So what I do is I do complex images of children where I go and I put an innocent face. The first face I draw down is innocent, well, I consider innocent. And then I cut other faces and add to that to make a human face. It's a piece in there, in that room. When I try to make them monstrous, I cannot. I do it, I look at it, I hate it, because I think at that point, I'm giving people what they think instead of what I want them to see. So that piece in that room with the little boy who's holding, I made it ugly. I can't do it. And I should have kept that work. But I put it out into the world. But his lips are big and his face is scrunched and he has no nose. And he's just like this and just waiting, and it's just, to me, it's very painful to do work like that. It's easier to do the work when you first walk into the gallery and you see the little girl and she's innocent and she's cute. She's asking you to take care of her. That's someone that people can relate to. But if you saw juxtaposition that boy's face against that girl, who are you more afraid of? They're both black children, but you will be more afraid of the little boy. And I don't want that, because that's feeding into a narrative, a stereotype that we shouldn't have. But I go to this period of saying, well, I don't know if people are getting to work. Maybe it's too sweet, maybe it's, too bubblegum, but if you look at the work, there's a lot of hidden stuff in there. And yeah, I can put it in your face and make you upset and challenge your own identities as women, as white people or French people, and tell you, look what you have done to people of color around the world, and da-da-da-da, and this and that, and I'm talking to you like this and this and this, and telling you, you're gonna close it off. You're not gonna hear me. But if I feed you the medicine with a little honey, a little chocolate, you taste it, and then if you look at it long enough, you'll get what I'm saying. It's gonna feed you, and that's what I want the work to do.
And because at the beginning it was mostly little girls.
Yes.
And did the little boys arrive into your work because of the horrible constant news in the States? And not just in the States, but I mean, it's really intense. Because it's like we've seen a little girl grow up with your work, and then suddenly boys arrive.
Yeah, it was very difficult because I'm not a male, so I don't know what black men go through, but what they tell us, and they're of course our partners and stuff. And I was going to add boys in 2020. I was going to go through the girls, get her up to age 14, and then move into boys. But I was looking for a picture of Dr. King when he was young. And I saw the picture of George Stinney, the little boy who was 14 years old, he was killed in his community. He was put in electric chair, the youngest person ever electrocuted in the United States. He was accused of killing 2 little girls that he could not possibly have killed. And I said, I'm gonna do that later. I'm not gonna worry about doing that type of stuff now. And the works, and Kevin can attest to this, that the works were just developing about the boys. It takes time. It took about 6 years to get the girls to where I needed them to be. And I started doing the boys, and I struggled with them until George Stinney. George Stinney helped me develop those works in 2019 and to the work that I'm doing currently. And sometimes it takes, I never believe people, you hear actors and they get up and say, oh I felt it. It was desire. And I'm like, okay, you're full of it. And, but George Stinney poked me, and nothing interrupts my sleep but Denzel Washington. That's the only thing. And he poked at me and poked until I had to look at him and create something. And so the first collage wasn't enough to tell his story. The second one wasn't enough. I kept telling my studio assistant, we're gonna stop. We're gonna only do 3 of these. I think for the show, Kevin, we had 4 in the show. And I said, we're gonna stop at 4. I don't want to take advantage of someone who was taken advantage of. But that wasn't enough. And I'm so happy. It's the best work I've ever done. I will tell you this, hands down. I did the last piece that I thought would be the last, and I was so pleasantly surprised, and it's called 80 Days. And that work is now hanging at the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. And the nation's capital, a system that systematically killed him, he's now hanging there in a prominent position. And that's what he was poking me for, is to kind of get this message out that, there are times when America has to face its own, justice system. And now they killed him, and now look at him. Everybody that comes to that National Portrait Gallery has to read his story. It's there.
I understand that you are very interested also with the question of justice, and you have also one painting in the Birmingham Museum, the Legacy Museum. In the last, I think in the last room, I saw one of your pictures there, which is a very important, I think, museum also in the US in Birmingham. But another thing I was wondering, because we can see through the galleries and we know your works, that the idea of composite identities is very important with the collages and so on. But the thing I was wondering, how do you relate to the cuts you do of the people? You're doing something else, but what is your relation with the one who have been cutting?
Yeah, I was asked by Vitamin C, what is the most important thing? Is it the painting or the cutting? And it's the cutting to me. Each artist, if you look at Lorna Simpson, Wengechi Mutu, Micheline Thomas, any other major collage artist, we all cut differently. And one of the things that I wanted to do is not really have my work look like Romeo Beard, and you know, people have said that, it does not. But in the way that he cuts his work, I try to cut my work differently. It was hard at first cutting images of Black children up, but so I used my own face. I
can see that. I wanted to ask that. I saw that.
Yeah, so I didn't recognize, or was that girl at 8 years old that I use in my work and call her Little Debbie. I hate being called Debbie. I mean, my dad had to yell at my sisters, my siblings, to stop calling me Debbie. I didn't like it. And so I cut up that face, and that allowed me to be able to merge collages in ways I never did before. And so now, when I find that face, I might cut out James Baldwin's eye, or I like Sidney Poitier. I'm loving him in all my work lately. I'm sorry, but I get hooked on people and I can't get off. Even Beyonce has been in some of my work. Yeah, just have lips. She got good lips, and things like that. And so the cutting is very important, because what you cut away is just important as what you lay down. And sometimes I put, like when I do little girls, I might put grown men in there, because I think sometimes people see them as a sexual being and not a child. And so it's under that lens and scrutiny, it's very important, and hopefully bring out some dialogue around that.
And why is this obsession with childhood? Where does it come from? If
Well,
you can know, if you can say.
Like I said, when I was at Syracuse, and you look at all the collage artists out there working, you know, Black women, Crystal, you know this, we all start with when we're about 25. We talk about our hair, our bodies, I mean, how people see us in the world. But when does that begin? When do we put on the gloves to start defending our own beauty? And I think that really happens at 12. But for me, it happened at 8. And so I decided that I was going to couch my argument about the body, the Black woman, how we are seen, and the independence of that at an early age. And no one was doing that at that time. Because I always talk about, when you enter the art world, you enter in a space, nothing is new. So you try to enter in a space that maybe some people have touched on, but not existed there. And so when I went back and I looked at Wengechi Mutu, I looked at other works of other artists, even Vermeer and Jacob Lawrence and William H. Johnson, nobody was concentrating on Black children in the way that I thought, especially Black women. And so I said, well, when I was 8, I wanted my hair differently than my sisters. We had the same color clothes, I hated it, and things like that. So if you look at little children and you allow them to dress themselves, they will put on blue stocking and a green dress and you know, a red hat, you know, because they don't understand color and style. They just know what they like, and they feel that independence, that first mark of independence. And so that's what I wanted to tap in on. And then I can use the society issues that we all have to deal with, which is the identity of race and racism and sexuality and gender bias and all the isms, and try to, you know, work that through the work. And again, it's done in a way that it allows you to come to the work. It doesn't, you know, like I said, I had in-your-face work, and I felt like, I mean, people brought it. I was almost gonna say, of course, that's not true. People brought it, but I always, you know, somebody would always say, well, I don't know if that's, I mean, it would bring up arguments, and then people would defend it, and I kept saying, I really didn't want that, you know, and I was young, of course, I somehow wanted to get angry, but the key was when Ron Artest, and I tell people all the time, when Ron Artest, I know French people may not know who it is, a Meta World Peace, he's a basketball player, and he went into the stands and was pummeling this little kid. because someone had threw water in his face and he didn't know who it was. And so he went up and he just, whoever was there, and he would beat him. And CNN played that over and over to the world. This big, humongous athlete with big arms pommeling that type of violence, and to the world that black men, and black people, uncontrollable, loud, blah, 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 all the negative stereotypes. And I just said, I didn't want that for my work. I want a conversation. And I want people to be able to understand what I'm saying without slapping them, even though they need to be slapped, even though, but you can't have a conversation when one person is yelling at you constantly.
And part of this conversation, there's also the fact that you just mentioned Kurt Schwitters, and that your work is also related to another historical period of art history. I read about art in Renaissance, for instance, but you mentioned earlier Anna Hoche collages. That's important for you as an artist.
Yeah, Kurt Schwitter. I was introduced to Kurt Schwitter's work in Dadaism at the Art Institute in San Francisco, and text in my work was coming out. It didn't have room, and I can tell you why it didn't have room to come out then. I would do these amazing, I thought were good pictures, but evidently they wasn't. And I would add text to them, and everybody would say, that's a good picture. Too bad you put the text in it, and that would hurt my feelings, of course. And I said, well, I'm gonna stop doing text in my work. And Schwitter did all these amazing, and the reason why I love the collage artists of that time is that they use collage, again, as we talked about, as an agency to gain power and attention and things like that. And so when I went to Syracuse, I was able to add literature from African American studies, and that literature was the key to opening up everything. And so when I looked at Kurt Schwitter and the artists of Dadaism, I was able to apply that into my work and use it as a visual form about talking about hair, over, under, through, back, twist, tie, pull, grease, tie, and bow. And that's doing a braid without actually having a picture of a person doing a braid. And then I did how to create a black woman, a cookbook. It's not out for purchase yet, but it's how to, if you want to make your own black woman, I have a cookbook. And thunder thighs, you want thunder thighs, it tells you how to make it, brown gravy, all sorts of things. It's really quite funny though, but using humor to talk about things that are very important, things that have, at times, cripple us. People can say, oh, your butt is too big, or you too dark, or whatever, and it tends to cripple people. So how can you use text in a way to give them a different type of visual? They don't actually have a visual. The text is creating the visual for them. I hope I answered that question. I'm sure it went around. Sure went around the mulberry bush, as they say.
And do you think that with Anna Hoche it's the same time of influence, because she's quite bit different and more engaged with some issues about feminism and with violence too.
Right, violence, yes. Unfortunately, because I do works of children, I can't actually do like guns and stuff in art. I won't do that. So sometimes my kids are doing this, which is like a gun pointing. Sometimes I do pop, like with popsicles, just little things like that. But there is a lot of trauma if you look in my work, especially, I want to talk about the work here, but let's see which work. If you look at the work with the mirror, okay, for example, that you walk into that work and she's barely painted. She's visible, her face is visible, her body has been washed out. And as you approach this, you see your full self in her. And she is present and absent at the same time. And that's what I wanted in this black cloak, because back, I don't think they do it now, but they used to put chalk around a dead body and mark it. And I do that chalk is to shape her, to say she is here, that idea of portraiture, that idea of fixed. This is a fixed image that cannot be moved, but yet she is disappearing in front of you. Who she is and what she wants to do is disappearing. But your image is fixed until you move away and another replaces it. She is still the same. So that is what that piece is about, and I really, that's another one I should have kept. I should have kept them all. Yeah.
And if I had a good look at your exhibition here, you use many square harlequins like, for the outfit of the children. What does it mean?
Well, okay.
And I have another question.
Okay.
I was thinking
Picasso.
yes. Just Picasso. Yes.
No.
Well, just Picasso.
Yeah,
Picasso.
just
Picasso. You have to explain yourself.
Yeah, well, he had some issues, and we can really get into that. But what's your other question?
And the other question was, I think that the ones in the first room have a white background,
Right.
and the ones in the second room have black ones.
Mhm.
What does it mean?
Well, most of my work has, before COVID, I felt like the images were centered around whiteness. Whiteness existed before blackness. That has always been the case. The world is created for a certain group of people, and everybody else is just adornments. And so after COVID, when I was doing work in COVID, the works became larger, more heroic. They took up the space, the white space. I don't know why that happened, but it did. But white space is still very important. When you see her like this, her face is not completed. Your eyes complete the face. That space that is around her is just as important as the face. That allows your eye. So you see the black face first, and then your eye completes with the white space. The images are not centered around whiteness anymore. And I think that's very important.
The first question about the triangle speaker.
Oh, Picasso, yeah. Yeah, Picasso has some issue, but this is the 50th anniversary of his death. And so I wanted to do works that dealt with a certain type of appropriation. He went to Africa and he appropriated he wouldn't say appropriation, but we say it now. Textures and patterns and things like that, tribal things, and he applied it to his work by Western standards. And he said, well, they were working instinctively, that somehow they were less educated in the way they created these patterns, but they were telling stories in that. So someone sent me a video of the Picasso Museum would have the green, the squares, and I did the same thing. And my work, because normally my works are really solid, and then I just lightly did it like Picasso did. But in my work, he's covered in blackness, and it's a black body. He went and took from a black body, and in the 20th century, and I took from him and placed it back in a black body in the 21st century. So there you go. How about that?
Bloum, I would really like to know from your sensibility how the works of Deborah could reveal something new or refresh something maybe in Niki de Phalle works.
Well, I think it's really fantastic for Niki to be included in an exhibition of Deborah's because, but I think they use similar language of seduction and poetry to deal with really difficult subjects. But you have it's generous enough that you can read it at different levels, but it's there. And I think that's why it resonates so strongly. I mean, I know the first time I saw the works, I was like, no, but really, and it was all these little girls. that were that seemed seductive and or hurt. And I think Niki uses in a different way. It's a way to empower, to gain strength and control on the world. And so I think it's really, I'm very grateful for this exhibition because it puts Niki in a contemporary language and issues that are addressed with a very different perspective and at the same time. So I think it's a gift. So bravo la Galerie, merci. And Gardy and everybody, because it's really, I really feel like first she would be really, I'm assuming she would be really happy and proud of this, to be participating in this kind of dialogue between such a great artist and herself.
I believe, and if you do good work, it carries on through history. That I hope, like her work, that my work does that some little artist, some big head artist come by and say, hey, I wanna have a conversation with Deborah Roberts. I hope that we don't have the problem of feminism and racism and sexism, all those isms again, that somebody can say, okay, that was then, this is now. So I'm gonna have a conversation with Deborah Roberts. So I hope that in the future.
I think, people don't mention, enough the poetry in your work, because there's like a musicality to your work that is obvious when you grew up with hip hop and the way things, the visual samples.
Right.
But there's really a lot of poetry, and I think it's really something that we're all missing in the world today, and you're giving it to us.
Yeah, well, thank you. Because when I'm in the studio, there is a rhythm. But the galleries, they get the work, or the museums, and they hang it, they don't put it in that sense, because if you look at some of the works, they're moving from side to side in a way that it is. Like sometimes the image is on this side, sometimes, and you don't want them facing you. There is a poetry within the work that I gave up. I tried to tell people, this is how you hang it, because this is how it was created. And it just doesn't happen. And I guess I could be more forceful in saying that. Well, who wants to be a bitch all the time? There's a lot of energy. I don't know, it's a lot of energy in being a bitch. I'm sorry, no little kids here, so y'all heard bitch before. It's a lot of energy, and I don't care what anybody say. I talked to my driver, and we were talking about how this guy was so angry, and he said, fuck you, fuck you. It was like a lot of energy. His face was so red. I mean, it was like, okay, all right, it's a car. We're not gonna hit you. It's just, he was upset for maybe about an hour. Who knows?
So Deborah, I think it's perfect conclusion to finish this
Yeah.
conversation. Not finish it.
I love it.
It will continue.
I love the French. She said, oh, after the bitch, we got to go. Let's go. Let's go this down. There's some other ones in there. There's some other ones in that audience. They might start getting up, saying those little words. Look at this. There's people in the apartment.
It's not true. It's a matter of timing, Deborah. But the conversation continues, and it continues with you, with the public, with the audience. If you have some question, we have time. You have time enough to continue a little bit. So please, let's enjoy your presence.
I would have a question. I'm a music and art journalist from Germany, and I recently had a conversation with, I don't know if you know him, George Lewis, professor for American music, Columbia University.
What's his name again?
George Lewis.
No,
George Lewis. He's a musician and also a professor, and he's into what he's calling decolonizing the Western art perspective, especially, for example, in contemporary composed music, classical music. So he's doing a new opera staged by an Afro-Canadian artist, Stan Douglas, and it's about a boy from the 19th century that was called Blind Tom. And Blind Tom was presented like a curiosity, but he was a prodigy, a composer, a pianist. And George told me, the images of Tom, and he played for the president in the White House when he was 10, and he composed an important work when he was 13, but the image was always like an adult, not like a boy. That brings me to what you have said, and he said he researched that, and that there is this psychology that black children, boys and girls, are viewed as adults, and that this is a big reason also for police murders and everything. And he says that his figure of his Blind Tom in his opera is kind of an Afro-pessimist. Probably you know the book that came out like 2 years ago or so. So not believing that the future will change anything or will improve. So I would like to ask you what you think about it. An Afro-pessimist
Do I think the future is going to change?
Yes,
people will
are you
see-
an Afro-pessimist too?
Yeah, I'm a pessimist. No, you know what? No, I'm not. No, I'm not a pessimist. I am a humanist. I believe in human beings. I think the idea to evolve into something amazing still exists. I thought COVID would do that. I thought, we knew in the 60s as the world was changing and you could feel it, how we were moving forward. I thought COVID would do that. It didn't. It kind of go a little bit backwards. So if I believe in human beings, I have to be positive in the aspect of being a humanist. But I do understand what he's talking about because I don't think that's going to change. It's too much profit involved in keeping people separate. I mean, and money, is one of the roots of all evil, of course. So, yeah, it's never going to change. And not till some creature comes down here and do what we've been doing to each other, to all of us. Then we'll stop. Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Lisa.
Yeah, thank you for speaking about all these, your work in this way. I want to talk about, or have us think about these collectors that are Black women that collect your work. Many of them are single name people. I'm going to put your business street. Shonda,
Yes.
Ava,
Yes.
Beyonce,
Yeah.
Oprah.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they own, Lisa. I don't think they own I don't own your work to address Black violence against Black bodies to white people. I own your work because of your love of Black girls and Black children. And that's a big part of, I think, the conversation. I think I want to make sure it's also front and center. And that I want to maybe hear from you for the first time, what are you saying to us? Because I wake up and see them and I feel seen, I feel protected, I feel, I thank you for that, for having that in my house.
Yeah. She has some great ones. That's what I talk about when I say I should keep this. There's a work that I did for Velvet show called Becoming. That was me. And I didn't recognize it until it was on the wall. I did recognize it, but I shouldn't have seen it. Sometimes you can look at something and know that's your story. And that was my story, and I should have kept that, that work in a sense, because sometimes you're right. I do love Black children. I love all children. I love babies. I tend to like boy babies better, but there is a sense that we all should protect all children. But sometimes I feel that sometimes, a little boy at 3, you can walk and put your head on a little Black boy, and at 13, you're scared to death of him. I just don't get it. He's still the same baby. He's just a little bit older. And I don't get that you could put your hand on a white child at 3, and at 13, he's little buddy, little buddy. And it's a big, huge difference. And you're right. I wanted to explain that and do that in my work because I do see the beauty in those kids. And I think everybody should be able to see that. Oh, Lisa's emotional, by the way. I know it. Lisa start crying. Okay, Lisa. Don't show the friends you can cry in the moment. Right.
Everybody will recognize that. But also, what touches me in the work is to give time, both to these children to actually have this process to grow and to protect that space of like innocence or as it can be, because we know how much it nourishes your future dreams, your careers, your view about life, about relationships, in all aspects of our lives. This is a time when we build each other up, and when that experience is fragmented or broken, we carry that along throughout
Right.
our lives.
Mhm.
And I think this is a very interesting reminder of that aspect, but also it shows me no parcours, because for artists we often, these days especially, don't give them the time to really explore, to dig deeper, to find and to bring out the best work and to blossom at the appropriate time. There is ageism and there are all these ideas that you need to break out before 30 or everything is over. And this is something that I think is a very good lesson in allowing the work to grow, because this is an important work. And if we block it or push it or don't accept it beyond a certain point, then we are missing out. And we may have missed out on Deborah. So thank you so much. And
Thank you.
it's very exciting for us to see what you're going to bring out next. So that's my question now. What are the next dreams, projects, subjects?
Okay. What about next project? I have a show at Site Santa Fe in New Mexico. I'm doing a show, all boys. It's called Come Walk in My Shoes, and it was also based on Ralph Yall and what had happened to him. If you walk in my shoes, then you can kind of see what I have to go through every day. And so we're gonna have a whole big dialogue about that and young men. I'm having a show in New York in the fall. And then hopefully next year I can take the year off. I want to try to do some sculpture, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, I think that it should be, whatever work you work in, Crystal, you know this, whatever work that you work in, you should be able to create different pathways to talk about that. So if I'm talking about collage and a flat piece of work on canvas, how can I translate that, or even in text, how can I translate that into sculpture? And the way, and there's a young artist already, he's a collage artist, he done beat me to, he's already doing it, but I'm much busier than him. I'm taking the next year off to really concentrate on doing that type of work. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see.
Yeah.
Another question.
Yes, just a couple of comments. I want to go back when you were talking about the image of the young boys' plays, with the big bus and so on. I think it's beautiful. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So, all this relates to each individual person. So I think it's amazing, painting, even looking at some of the work of like some collages like
I do. I mean, I struggled as an artist. I mean, it took me 30 years to get here. I always consider myself a successful artist. Maybe I wasn't financially successful. Maybe I had to borrow some money, every now and then. But I always stayed true to my work. I mean, I stayed on that path. And it shouldn't be this hard, but it is. And so what I try to do, and it kind of come back to bite me a little bit, but what I try to do is you're right, connect artists together, try to give different tools in order to be a little bit more successful in the art world. Maybe your Instagram had too many cats or dogs in it, and you can't find the art. If I'm looking for someone's art, and they say, oh, I used to examine crystal work, and I go in and there's all these flowers and books and all this other stuff in there. Where's the art? So after a couple pages, I'm done. But if you have a page that's full of your art and explanation of your art, and then there's 5, Instagram work and the algorithm. You got to do hashtag art, hashtag mixed media, hashtag painting, hashtag contemporary art, hashtag mixed media. I think I said mixed media, but it's 5 of them. And you use those, painting and drawing. And that will get me on curator sites because that hashtag works. So I always, when I go to universities or talking to different artists, I try to connect people. I try to give some of the things that I use. I mean, I couldn't get attention if I jumped off a bridge and started flying away. And so what I would do when I was coming up as an artist, I had let's say if I had an exhibition here, I got no press, I would get on the phone and call the news, news, y'all call news. And I would say, hello, this is Deborah. I said, hello, this is Sharon Smith. I saw a wonderful artist at Galerie Mitterrand. You should go and take a look. And I said, it was really good. And I think the public would like it. And I would hang up. And then all of a sudden, a couple of days later, I get a call from the news. They want to do a special interest. Oh, yes, thank you so much. And it was me all along. And then also, I think, with connection with other artists, and curators say, well, I live in Utah. There is not a lot of curators who want to come to Utah. But if you do a cold call to someone, I've done it a lot of times, all that they can do is say no. They cannot take your birthday away. Christmas still is going to come. It may hurt your feelings, but Alexander Grant, who's a wonderful text-based artist, before I went to New York, I was so afraid of how I was going to be received. I called her, I said, look, I want to send you 12 images. Can I have 15 minutes of your time just to tell you about the work? It was new eyes, fresh eyes on the work. And I don't want anything from you. I just need you to look at the work. You send it ahead. She writes me back and says, no problem. So we ended up having an hour conversation. She only guaranteed me 15 minutes, but it was up to me to push the rest of the dialogue. So I try to tell artists, just kind of talk to people. So, we have 2 artists here. We have Sharon right here, and we have Crystal. They both are collage-based artists. They're doing different works, and they only know each other. I think you guys only know each other from Instagram.
From here.
From here, yeah. And so, yeah. So that's what you do to get other artists into it. There is, right now, people are looking at Black art. It's the first art they look at first. Right now, we're in our moment. So create good work and dialogue. It's room for everybody, no matter what people think. There is, but if you do sloppy work, you don't spend the time, you don't put the effort in, it's not gonna hold up. It's like building your house on water. If you don't have the proper equipment, it's all gonna drown. Yeah. So I think it's really important to help other artists. I do.
You do.
I do. I really do. I don't know. Something's wrong with me. It's great. It's wonderful to not have a job, and your job is art. At 11 o'clock. Cook your little eggs. It's great. Wonderful. Okay.
So it's